Ciao, everybody. We are here for the, as promised, Belmont Stakes horses by the Thorograph numbers and patterns. And if nothing else, we showed what a valuable tool Thorograph can be in any race, but especially in these Triple Crown classic races. We came up with Mage in the Kentucky Derby as a horse that was very dangerous, forward-moving pattern, extremely live. Kentucky Oaks, pretty mischievous, live, forward-moving pattern, gets the job done, wins the race. Preakness, we identified Mage as going from a dangerous horse to the horse to beat. Didn't get the setup, but the horse we like the best, National Treasure, who we bet hard, forward-moving pattern. Love the pattern going into the race, gets the job done. Before we get to the Belmont Stakes horses, based on my interpretation of the Thorograph numbers and patterns, what we're going to do right here is go back.
I got a very strong opinion here, and if you watch replays like I do and take notes, I don't know how you get past Modesto. I'm hoping he's not the favorite. I'm hoping they make We the People the favorite. I think it's Modesto's race to lose. And I'll tell you this, it's probably my strongest opinion on the day. All roads lead to Modesto for me. Any which way I dice and slice this race. If you watch his replay, it reminds me of Code of Honor. Code of Honor, if you watch the Derby replay, okay, I always said, and I made a score on Code of Honor when he won the Travers, and I remember I was in the paddock for the Travers at Saratoga, and I forget who it was, but somebody from one of the Nels, somebody saw me that knew me and interviewed me on for either TV or the internet or whatever the heck it was. Asked me who I liked. I said, Code of Honor. Can you tell us why? I said, well, I handicapped it. I liked him. And I said, and a lot of people think I'm crazy, but if you watch the replay of the Kentucky Derby, if it didn't rain and he wasn't on the rail, he probably would have won the Derby. And the guy looked at me like I had two heads, but if you watch the replay, I believe that. If you watch Modesto's Derby replay, okay, there's no way you could watch that replay, in my mind, and bet Rich Strike. Can't do it. If maybe Stevie Wonder could do it, or Ray Charles. I mean, no disrespect to anybody, but I don't see how anybody else could do it. He ran about 100 yards further and was finishing very, very good. Okay? Now, transfer to, 5 weeks later, whatever it is, a mile and a half, a small field. What do you got in the belt? Well, 8 horses as opposed to 20 in the Derby. Okay? Irad from the rail, took him to the outside, took the overland route, turning for home. He was probably closer to Keeneland than he was to Churchill Downs. I mean, it was ridiculous, the trip that this horse had. He ran so much further than the winner that I don't see how you could watch the race where the winner come out of the 21 hole, moved inside, the seas parted like the Red Sea, everything went right, perfect storm, boom, he comes up the rail and win. Modesto between horses, carried wide, went wider, everything. I can't see how you could watch that race and bet Rich Strike over Modesto. So that's that.
Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com. That was from our Belmont Stakes webinar last year. Loved Modesto big time. Loved the Belmont Stakes. It's a bit of a different animal than the Derby, and the Preakness has to be looked at differently. We're not doing a seminar this year. We're doing two things. We're going to do this show, which is the Belmont Stakes horses, based on the Thorograph numbers and patterns. We're going to do a show on the Belmont. Gio Setti, valuable asset to Pass the Wire, does a deep dive like nobody I've ever seen. Gio, he handicaps a race like nobody I've ever seen. There could be 20 horses in the race. He handicaps it first, second, third, fourth, fifth. His exact precise order of finish, he calls it, from 1 to 10, 20, whatever is in there, that's how many Geo dissects. But for those of you that are interested, there is a seminar that is worth attending. Thorograph is doing a seminar. Jerry Brown does a Belmont Stakes Day seminar every year. They'll be covering undercard races. They'll be covering the Belmont Stakes. A lot of great insight there. You can go to thorograph.com. Check that out. Check out all the information on Thorograph on their website. They've got a lot of great instructional, tutorial, and basic information that'll get you more familiar than I can on these shows. And always feel free to reach out to me and see what we can, do to help you with understanding the numbers and the patterns. Remember, it's not as simple as who's got the lowest number, that's the fastest horse in the race. It's much more about the patterns and understanding them. We got another, my opinion, huge show coming up. Jeff Franklin from Thorograph is going to be joining me on a show in the near future, probably the week after the Belmont Stakes, because there's just so much going on, this week, where we're going to really dissect and go into the bounce or regression and what it actually is, what it means, how to recognize it, how to know if a horse can bounce or regress and still win. The bounce is a very real thing. A lot of people don't believe in it, but in order to understand it and recognize it, you have to be using Thorograph. If you're not using, Thorograph, you really don't know. You can't really tell definitively, or as definitively, maybe is a better term or a more comfortable term to use, if you're not using it. So you need to be, if you want to understand the bounce or regression, and that angle will cause you to make a lot of money at some point in your wagering career. So with that in mind, check out that show coming up. Jeff is really, really sharp. Jerry Brown is really, really sharp. I think everybody that attends that seminar will get a lot out of it. We've had enormous success with the 3 Thorograph shows we've done so far. The Derby, we were spot on. The Preakness, spot on. The Kentucky Oaks, spot on. Now we got the Belmont. Can we do it again? Well, I say we pressure for breakfast. Pressure is for tires. Pressure doesn't bother me in the least, especially in this game, but in anything else, because that's just the outlook that it's best to have and that I've had for a long time. So we'll get right into it in a minute and go through these horses, see who's fast, who's not, who's faster, who's slower, who's moving forward, and who's not. And remember, it's not just who's got that fastest number or lowest number that tells you who the fastest horse. Like I said, that's like learning the bar chords to, smoke on the water and thinking you know how to play the guitar. Doesn't work that way. So hang with me and we will get into this Belmont Stakes 2023 in a minute.
History remembers moments of extraordinary strength, skill, and determination. True greatness is forged by those who fulfill their destiny.
Tracking trips with Pick 6 King Jonathan Stettin. It's one of the best tools in horse racing for any level of player. It's your second set of eyes, spotting troubled trips, betting angles, track trends, horses to watch and favorites to fade, 10 figs, ticket structure, and more. At Tracking Trips, you're a friend with benefits. Not a member? You must hate winning money. Join Tracking Trips now. Visit pastthewire.com and we'll see you in the winner's circle. Remember, nobody does it better.
Okay, we got a small field, not a big field. Once again, like in the Preakness, there does not seem to be an abundance of early speed. This is not the race this is not the day we're gonna handicap the Belmont Stakes. We're gonna do that later. They'll do that on the Thorograph Seminar. You'll all hopefully do that on your own as well, because that's what it's all about. So with that, what we're going to do here is go through the Belmont horses by the Thorograph numbers and patterns, see who's moving forward, who's not fast enough, who's faster, who's slower, and who's got the right type of pattern to put them in the winner's circle and is also fast enough to get into the winner's circle. We'll get into a couple of little other things about, pace, style, setup, this and that, but we're not really going to handicap the race on that level. We're really going to focus on the Thorograph patterns here. So with that, we will start with National Treasure, the Preakness winner, who is coming off 3 weeks and a very, very hard race. He ran, he went slow early and he got that slow half mile. What was it, 48 and 4, something like that. He ran hard that whole stretch. Chad Brown's horse, Blazing Sevens, collared him, got a little in front of him. He dug in, had enough left, and was able to hold him off. And he's coming off a very, very hard race. But let's see what the patterns say. And for the record, personally, I think it's the kind of hard race that is not gonna push him towards a regression or even a bounce. I think it's the kind of race he's going to benefit off, especially in a race where, once again, he's probably going to wind up on the lead. And I believe that John Velasquez and Bob Baffert played cat and mouse with everybody leading into the Preakness. I don't think there was any doubt that their plan from the rail was to gun, get the lead, and try and go wire to wire. When they did all that talk and Johnny did all that talk about, well, we'll play the break, he doesn't necessarily have to be on the lead, we'll see how it goes, this, that, the other thing, I think that was all cat and mouse. I think their plan was go, gun, and try and take it all away. And Johnny rode a masterful ride, masterful. You can ride masterfully on the only speed. He took that, he took the field wide, carried everybody wide out, took his horse out into the middle of the track. A horse will relax better when they're out in the middle of the track as opposed to when they're running on the rail on the lead. And he just rode a great race. But let's get to these numbers and see, because there's some interesting things about National Treasure that we'll talk about. As a 2-year-old, he started out with 6 1/4, goes forward 4.5, goes forward again to that 2.3, that fast 2-year-old race that kind of sticks out to me. He comes back as a 3-year-old, runs a solid 4 at Santa Anita, his first start, repeats that 4, doesn't win either of those starts. And then in the Preakness, when he had the paired 4s, and I was sure in my mind he was going to go past the best 2-year-old number, that 2 3/4 that, like I said, sticks out. He didn't. He run another 4. So now we got 3 4s, steady, fast. Maybe not fast enough to win the Belmont, but fast. 4 4 4. I think that he's an odd horse. He's taken a while to come around. He was a good looking horse at the Breeders' Cup last year. I was watching him and clocking him there. I think he's coming around, and I think that I was a race off on that forward move. I think come Saturday, he goes past that 2 3/4 and runs his best race to date off that Preakness hard effort. So I think he's got a phenomenal pattern once again with those 3 4s. And I think we see a forward move from National Treasure, who also has what it appears at this point to be a pace advantage in the Belmont Stakes. Raise Kane. not in love with his pattern. As a 2-year-old, 21, starts slow, 7 3/4, regresses off that to 11.5, then 6 1/4. So he's kind of like a Z pattern type of horse as a 2-year-old. And as a 3-year-old, he comes back and he runs, 12 1/4 first time out. That was on the synthetic. Then he goes to Aqueduct, runs a 4 1/4 in the mud. So that was his best race. Second start off the 3-year-old campaign. He runs his best number, not fast enough to win the Belmont Stakes. He kind of repeats that at Keeneland, 4, and he goes from a 4 1/4 to 4.5. Then he regresses a little bit to 6 1/4. I don't know that he's going the right way. I don't know that his pattern is indicative of a forward move. So I'm going to say no go on Raise Kane for my liking on the patterns. Red Route 1. He's an interesting horse on an angle that I like a lot. We'll come to that, but first we'll talk about the patterns. As a 2-year-old, 17 1/4, goes forward 13 1/4, then really jumps forward to 6.5, regresses or bounces, as we say, to a 16 1/2 off that big race. Then comes back and runs an 8 1/2 off the regression to close out his 2-year-old campaign. Comes back as a 3-year-old, equals his best 2-year-old race. I like when they beat it. He didn't. He runs a 6 1/2. Then he goes forward and does it. So that shows me some quality. Sometimes, if it's not the first race, it's the second race. I can live with that. He runs a 3 3/4, comes back, runs a 6 1/2. Then in the Preakness, he runs a 6 1/4. So he's got those 3 6s. How do they match up? They're not as fast as National Treasure's 3 4s, but they're that nice, steady thing that I like. And he's got that 3 3/4 race back, 4 starts at Oakland. I think he goes back to that race and has a forward moving pattern, fast enough and good enough and forward enough to win the Preakness. That I don't know. I think there's horses that are going to be faster than him. But he does have a forward-moving pattern. So if you like him, I certainly wouldn't talk you off him. He should be running late. I think he's definitely a horse that's extremely live to get into the triple and superfecta for sure. And I upgrade him a little bit. I upgrade National Treasure because of the pace. I upgrade Red Route 1 because there's an angle that I'll mention here that I like. He's a deep closer. He likes to do his running late, but last out in the Preakness, he made an early move on the inside into that slow half mile. That's not his style. So he made that early move, wound up in the mix on the inside, fell apart, backed up, taken out of his game. I think he reverts to his normal running style, coming from way off the pace. And I like the angle of horses that get taken out of their game and then get put back into their game the next start, because a lot of times that helps them move forward. So with that, combined with the pattern, he's got a forward moving pattern. I just don't think, he looks like he's sitting on a forward moving race. I just don't think it's going to be enough to get him into the winner's circle, or he's going to be fast to get into the winner's circle, unless, caveat, Belmont Stakes, different animal, Big Sandy, he gets the distance. Some of the other faster horses don't. Now we got a whole different scenario. So let's keep that in mind for Red Route 1. Tapit Trice, a bit of an enigma for me. I thought he was sitting on a big run in the Kentucky Derby. He fooled me. But we've talked about how every year in the Derby, there's a couple of guarantees. One of them is that some big figure horse just doesn't bring it and just doesn't fire. Tapit Trice was at least one of those horses this year. As far as his pattern goes, it's also intriguing. He showed talent from the beginning. He showed fight. He showed gameness. First time out, Aqueduct in November as a 2-year-old. He runs 8 3/4, goes forward second start, 6.5. Gulfstream Park, which doesn't really favor his style of running and his game. He runs a 4.5 first time out. So he runs as a 3-year-old. So he runs past his best 2-year-old number. He goes a little forward at Tampa in that big Tampa race that he ran, without breaking well. He runs a 4.25 in the race at Keeneland, which is probably his best race, certainly his fastest race. He runs a 1. He runs back to that 1. He's going to be awfully tough to beat. And he's certainly a horse that looks like he's going to get the distance. In the Derby, he ran a 5. And that was a 5 without him bringing his game and without him running, his best race and really being in contention. And he still run a 5, which is faster than some of these horses. So Tapit Trice is logically a contender. If we toss the Derby, he's certainly got a pattern that suggests he can win. He should go forward off that 5. If he runs back to that 1, he's extremely tough. The knock or rub on him is that he's the horse that everybody coming out of the Derby is going to like. Everybody's going to say, yeah, he just didn't run his race in the Derby. He's a deep closer. He's the one, he's the one, he's the one. And, like I said on the Preakness recap and early Belmont Thoughts show that I did, a lot of times those horses don't win. Those horses that are closing in the Derby or just look like, they didn't bring it in the Derby and they're the hot horse in the Belmont, just don't get it done. It's a different race, different pace. Deep closers don't always do as well as you would think that they would do in that race. This is a race that lacks a lot of pace. So I have a feeling he might be a pretty significant underlay. That said, he's a serious contender. I like him a lot in the Kentucky Derby. He certainly can win. I have a feeling he's more like the Modesto type, who I loved coming out of the Derby into the Belmont, and that was primarily off his trip in the Kentucky Derby. Like I said, I couldn't see anybody watching the replay of the Derby not betting Modesto in the Belmont Stakes last year. So, Tapit Trice, serious contender in here. He runs back to that 1 that he ran at Keeneland, and he's square in the mix. Tapit Shoes, as a 2-year-old, 19 3/4, goes forward to a 10.5. That shows how these, horses at 2 and 3 can make those big forward moves. We got another horse who's done that we'll get to. As a 3-year-old, he goes past the number 7.5, paired up at the fairgrounds, goes to Oakland Park, runs a 5.5, now comes into the Belmont Stakes. He's got a nice pattern, 7.5, 5.5, probably going to go forward again, but where's he going to go? 4, 3 and change, maybe. Can he make that big forward move and get into contention? But probably not. Probably looks like, he can move forward and will move forward, but enough to win? No. He's like a couple of the others that we spoke about and we'll talk about in here that, have a forward moving pattern, but just doesn't look like it's enough to get them, home first, as opposed to just getting a piece. Angel of Empire, extremely intriguing for a lot of reasons. I'm very reluctant to criticize riders. I believe that riders got a very tough job, and it's easy to armchair quarterback jockeys and critique them. And when I do it in a way of respect, not disrespect, unless it's just something blatant. But I thought if there was one ride in the Kentucky Derby that I personally didn't like, it was Pratt's ride on Angel of Empire. Now, keep in mind, those of you that watched the shows know that I didn't like Angel of Empire going into the Derby. I thought he was overrated, and I didn't think he was going to win the race. I liked, 3 or 4 at least horses better than him. And I'm not one of those, handicappers that when it's punch time, will tell you I like 4, 5, 6 horses. I like 1 or 2. And Angel of Empire did not make my cut. but he ran very well, despite, in my opinion, Pratt giving him too much to do. He dropped him much further back than I thought he had to be and should be. He made a big wide move. Looked like he was going to get into serious contention, even possibly contend for the win, but it was unrealistic to expect the horse to be able to sustain that type of run that wide the way that he did it. So, you know, I criticize, you know, the ride the same way I would say, you know, Dan Marino, phenomenal quarterback. But if you watch a play and you say, you know what, I think he should have threw the ball to Dupa on a fly pattern down the sideline instead of trying to hit Clayton, you know, going across the middle. Is that a criticism of a quarterback? Yeah. Can I criticize Dan Marino? Not really, but you know, the same way with riders. You know, I don't know what Pratt felt, what Pratt thought, what his judgment of the pace was, or even what the instructions may or may not have been. So I personally thought he gave the horse too much to do, and the horse ran extremely well despite that. So good takeaway. We love all the horses, but we don't marry them. If you like the horse in the Derby, you don't have to like him in the Belmont. And if you didn't like a horse in the Derby, doesn't mean you can't like him in the Belmont. I didn't like Angel of Empire in the Derby. That was then, this is now. Let's look at his numbers and see where he shakes up. As a 2-year-old, not particularly fast. And I don't think he was high on the Brad Cox radar at that time as well. And I don't think that's a secret. You know, started his career at, you know, Indiana, 16 and a quarter, 19 at Kentucky Downs, back at Indiana, 11 and a quarter. Not going to set the world on fire with those numbers. As a 3-year-old, first time out, goes past his best 2-year-old number, but again, not setting the world on fire, 9 and a quarter. And then the light bulb went off. Something happened, something changed. This horse got faster and better, and in a very good way and consistent way. Off that Oaklawn Park race, he goes to the fairgrounds and runs a 2.5. By far his fastest number, and a number that's fast enough to contend for the win here. He then goes back to Oaklawn where he run that 9. So he proved it's no fluke, because in the second start at Oaklawn, he runs a solid, an even 2. So he gets faster than the 2.5. Now he runs a 2. Comes back in the Derby and runs a 2. So what do we got? We got a 2.5, 2, 2. So similar to National Treasure, that's got those 3 4s. He's got these 3 2s. And they're 2s faster than 4. So he's absolutely got a forward moving pattern. He's a little disadvantaged by the pace. I get it. But he looks on his pattern extremely dangerous and live. And if Pratt can keep him closer and move him at the right time, and he takes to the Belmont Oval and Big Sandy, Angel of Empire is an extremely dangerous horse to get the money come Belmont Day. I think the biggest thing he will have to overcome is how much National Treasure goes forward, whether Tapit Trice bounces back, and you know, the pace disadvantage that he has. But you know, pattern wise, I would say he probably has the best looking pattern to me in the race. Does that make him the winner? No, but it makes him a serious contender, and it certainly could make him the winner. Very, very live, very dangerous off his pattern. Arcangelo, interesting horse. 2-year-old, runs a 13, comes back as a 3-year-old, runs a 10 at Gulfstream Park, goes forward, runs a 5 at Gulfstream Park, big jump forward, goes forward again, another 5 points, runs a 1 in that race at Belmont. So here you got a horse that's just jumping forward in leaps and bounds. You got a 10, a 5, and a 1. I like progression. I like continued and steady progression. What scares me, and I don't like that much, is those big jumps, 10, 5, 1. He's not going to jump 5 points again and run a 5 negative. If he does, wow, okay, the race is for second. It's all over. Nobody's going to run a 5 negative here. And, that would just, say Arcangelo is a phenomenally fast and improving racehorse. I'm not sold yet, and I think his pattern screams more of a regression or bounce off those two big forward moves as opposed to another forward move or a big forward move or even a slight forward move. So I see a horse that's more likely to regress off those two big forward moves when I look at Arcangelo, or bounce, as we like to say. Hit Show is an intriguing horse, a little tough to gauge pattern wise, but we'll look. 10.5 first out as a 2-year-old, doesn't go forward, goes 12.25, and then 4 3/4. So he makes a big jump in his last start as a 2-year-old. Comes back as a 3-year-old, says, "Hey, I'm a serious horse." Runs a 2 at Aqueduct. Regresses a little off that to a 4.5, then comes back and runs a 3.5 in the Derby with not the most ideal of trips. So that might be a little bit of an, traffic influenced or trip influenced number that might have been a little bit better had his trip been a little bit better. Now, Thorograph takes trip into account, so maybe not, but I like to look at it and put my own little spin on things, and I say maybe with a different trip he could have gotten a better number. So what do we got coming in? We got a 2, 4.5, 3.5, and now he gets the 1.5 miles at the Belmont. I would say, because of a little bit of a Z, it doesn't scream forward to me. It screams consistent. I could see another 3, maybe a little regression back to a 4. And I would call him, based on that, a horse that's kind of on the fringes. If things go his way, maybe a contender. If some don't fire, maybe a contender. Looks a cut below the better ones, talent-wise and pattern-wise. Not a bad pattern, just not a pattern that screams forward. And I'm kind of on the fence with him. So I'm going to say his pattern and his talent level looks to be a cut below. Miracolo, 16, 15.5, 13, 11.5, 16 as a 2-year-old, not near fast enough. Comes back as a 3-year-old and still hasn't improved and shown that he's got the kind of speed or ability to run with these kind of horses. 12 3/4, 14.5, 12.5, 11.5, and then a 10. Proved a little bit last time to a 10. That is his best race, but it's far from good enough to even contend here. So he would need a major jump forward to contend. I don't see it. Forte, our likely favorite, coming off the significant layoff now, because he didn't get to run in the Derby, so he hasn't run since the Florida Derby. Now we're going to ask him to go 1.5 miles off the bench. Todd's one of the few people that can get a horse to do something like that, but it's not what I would call an ideal scenario. And he was a vet scratch in the Kentucky Derby, so how ouchy was he really? We don't know the answer to that. He's got that hopeful positive that was probably a minor thing, but also was something. So he's coming off the vets list and winding up in the Belmont Stakes from very competitive connections that would love nothing more than to win this Belmont and say, "See, we told you, rah, rah, rah." But that doesn't get you the carnations come Saturday. So let's take a good hard look at Forte, who is an extremely talented horse. As a 2-year-old, 7, 10.5, then a 3 3/4 in the hopeful that he win, and got taken away from him for the positive. Comes back, Keeneland 2 3/4, then a 2.5 in the Breeders' Cup, where he just made that nice wide move, ran around everybody, ran past Cave Rock, who we have not seen yet, but might be as good or better at this point or later in the year as all of these 3-year-olds. Remember, you heard that here. So, as a 3-year-old, he comes back in that first race at Gulfstream, and he runs a 2.5. In the Florida Derby, he runs down Mage from a wide post. We now know Mage was super legitimate because he come off that race and wins the Kentucky Derby. He runs a 3.5, running down Mage. Neither one had an ideal trip. He was wide. He had to dig in and work a little harder than we all thought he would to catch Mage. But let's be honest. Did he have to be fully cranked up? Probably not. You know, we know now the horse has had some minor issues. We know the Derby was the goal. He was already in the Derby, so they didn't have to win the Florida Derby. I think he won the Florida Derby on guts and talent and raw ability, as opposed to being primed for his best race, which I think they were shooting for in May, on the first Saturday in May, and he won anyway. So there's no doubt about Forte being talented and having a lot of heart. If you doubt that, you're making a mistake, because he had to dig in and run and get up and beat Mage, and might not have been fully cranked to do it. But pattern wise, he goes from a 2.5 to a 3.5. Doesn't really have a forward moving pattern. Doesn't really get any break with that layoff coming into the Belmont, going 1.5 miles. That's a long distance to have to go. I really thought they would regroup based on everything that happened and go for the Jim Dandy and the Travers, but they know what they're doing with their horse better than I do. So I got to assume the horse is okay, and he's going to run his race. Now, forward moving pattern, no. But here's the thing: his last 4 races, 2 3/4, 2.5, 2.5, 3.5. I mean, the 2.5 to 2s, it's fast enough to put him right in here. So if you get that distance off this layoff, he doesn't have to go forward. He doesn't have to have a forward moving pattern. He's got a steady pattern. He's just kind of got to bring it again and get the distance in order to be a contender. So, when I wager, now he's going to be the favorite, okay, or co-favorite. When I wager, Tapit Trice might be the favorite. Maybe Angel of Empire will be the favorite. I don't know. I like to bet a horse that looks like they're coming to a peak on these Thorograph numbers. Look like they're definitely sitting on a forward move, and definitely sitting, on a peak race. There were 2 horses that jump out and scream that to me. One is National Treasure, who I loved in the Preakness. The other is Angel of Empire, who I didn't like in the Derby and didn't run in the Preakness. So this is probably a race going to be very difficult for me to single, like I'll say sometimes, if I stick with you, I would have to cut myself in 2. I don't know. Those are the 2 to me that have the best patterns in the race. But we will do a show on the Belmont, the Thorograph Seminar on the Belmont, and some of the key undercard stakes is worth checking out. Gio's show is definitely worth checking out. And I will be back in a minute with some final thoughts and wrap this thing up.
3/4 in 112-1. Known Agenda is now on to take over the lead. It's Known Agenda for St. Elias Stable. Florida Derby winner, Known Agenda.
Dan Oman here with some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
Couple of things we'll close out with. Thank you, everybody, for watching these shows. The Thorograph shows were extremely popular. The comments are phenomenal. I try and answer all the questions. If you ask a question and I didn't answer it, it's probably because I didn't see it. So ask it again, because I try and answer everybody and get back to everybody, unless it's just something ridiculous off the wall. There's, like they say, there's one in every crowd. There's more than one in our crowds, but that's just the nature of the game. So if you got a serious question or a comment or something like that, I try to get back to everybody. I love discussing horses, and I love sharing stories and things about racing. We all love this game, or we won't be here, right? So with that, there's a couple of shows I want to point out. There's a video I did not too long ago that's in the handicapping section called pace handicapping. Definitely worth watching. There's a video I did on ticket structure. Not everybody likes to structure tickets the way I do, but if you want to go for kills and scores, it's a great video to watch. I'm not going to put links to all of them. I'll put a link to the Thorograph Seminar when the announcement comes out. I'll add it to the summary of this video, so you'll be able to come back here and check it, or you can go to thorograph.com, and there's links to thorograph.com on passthewire.com, so it's easy to find. But those two videos are worth watching. The other thing I want to mention for the people that are new to the channel or really haven't explored it and Past the Wire, we have in our one-on-one with segments that are under the interviews tab in the show, and you got to go back for some of them, but we've got, not because it's Past the Wire TV, I would say this if it was anybody else, we've got some of the best interviews out there, bar none. Okay, I like to say often imitated, never duplicated. I like to call our one-on-one shows the Rogues Gallery, because that's just me, but stuff that's never been talked about. And a lot of it. We got Paulo Lobo going to tears about driving Uber a couple of months before he's got horses in the Breeders' Cup. Ron Turcotte, rider of Secretariat, talking about things about Secretariat that went on behind the scenes that he never talked about with anybody. Such a show that's worth watching. Lafitte Pincay, and Ron Turcotte, I said something to him that I've said to people that they tell me I'm nuts. And I said to him, Ron, people tell me I'm nuts when I tell them that I think Secretariat was a grass horse and was better on the turf than the dirt. And he said, you're not crazy at all. You're right. On the show. The Frankie Dettori show, phenomenal. Bob Baffert, phenomenal. Chad Brown, a couple of great shows. And I will still say, and I laugh with Chad, who I love, all his interviews were deadpan, serious, all business. And he's still a serious, all business guy when he talks horses. There's not a lot of play in Chad unless you really get to know him personal and get him alone. But I got him a little bit looser than anybody else did a couple of years ago on one of our shows, and he's just a phenomenal trainer and great shows. So if you'd like interviews, go back at somebody and check some of these interviews out. They are really, really classic. Some of the things that have come out never come out before. Lafitte Pincay telling stories that he's never, told before about losing races and all kinds of things. Just great stuff. So If you like that kind of stuff and you're a student and fan of the game, check it out. You will not be disappointed. I guarantee it. With that, thank you everybody for watching. Our tracking trip members, we will have a full analysis of the Belmont card on tracking trips. So if you ever thought about joining, this is certainly a good week to do it. A lot of more shows, a lot of shows coming up. The Jeff Franklin show, look out for that. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like so you don't miss any of this stuff, or at least check back. And let's enjoy Belmont Week. Let's enjoy the Belmont Stakes card. I was originally against loading all those stakes on one day, moving the Met Mile from Memorial Day to Belmont Day. But hey, we'll play the hand we're dealt. It'll be a great card. There's some key spots on that card that I'm salivating over. So let's all look forward to that. And thank you, everybody. Can't thank you all enough. Ciao for now. Nobody does it better.